Today's topic may not be for everyone, but we are going to talk about something we've all considered at some time: breasts and breast health. If you or someone you know or love is struggling with chronic health issues after getting breast implants, then you do not want to miss today's conversation. Welcome to C60 Health Connections, where we meet with leading experts in the health and wellness space. On today's show, we are going to meet with Sarah Phillipe, who is a registered nurse, a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, a true cellular detox practitioner, and a breast implant illness expert. Sarah believes that we all need to take personal responsibility for restoring our health by addressing the root causes that contribute to chronic illness. And I couldn't agree with her more. My name is Jessica McNaughton, and I am the Chief Operating Officer at C60 Purple Power. I'm a business executive with years of experience in corporate America. And for more than 20 years, I've been exploring various modalities in health, wellness, and spirituality. Now, before we get started, these statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. Any products or topics discussed today are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, prevent, or mitigate any disease. So, Sarah, so great to see you. Thank you so much for joining me today.
It's great to see you too, Jess. And I'm just happy to be here and sharing this really important information with your audience.
Yeah, I've learned so much from you in a short amount of time, and I'm really grateful that you've carved out some time to talk with us. So first, I want to start out. Maybe you can just share a little bit about your story and your background so our audience can understand not only how relatable that you are, but if anyone out there is struggling with this issue, you've walked this path and you've been on this journey of health and wellness yourself. So let's just start with you and how you arrived at this point.
Yeah. So it kind of, I usually like to start off just by sharing kind of where in my life breasts anyway, became important to me, because I think a lot of the time we can really take it even farther back than we think. And there are just all of these just hidden messages that we receive that kind of shape who we become and our thoughts and our feelings about ourselves, right? So for me, my desire for breast implants and just having a larger chest came from childhood, when a really important person in my life just kind of unknowingly said, you're going to be 4'11" just like me, but don't worry, because you're going to have the Johnson boobs. And the don't worry part is significant there, right? Because it means to me, if I don't get those Johnson boobs, then I have something to worry about, right? And that boobs are really important, big boobs. So that really stuck with me. And, I was probably around 10 at the time when I heard that message. And so, we're just like sponges absorbing the world around us, trying to make meaning out of it at that age, right? Yeah. And so that really stuck with me. And there were other things about appearance that were kind of instilled in me as well. And so, who you are and your value really kind of was connected to the outward appearance in my mind. And so fast forward many years later, and, I stuffed my bra in middle school just so that I could look like I had a bigger chest than I really did, because I just, that was important to me. And then I started to get really, really into fitness as an adult in my late 20s, and started doing some bodybuilding. And, I never competed. That wasn't really my intention. But I wanted the complete look. Like I just wanted that look. And so in order to really have that 100%, I chose to get breast implants. And when you're working out that hard and you're really lean, you really lose all breast tissue. And so that's kind of where it came from for me. It just was like that initial exposure to the concept of breasts are important and that I should worry if I didn't get them. And then, seeing these women on stage and having this perfect figure and wanting that, just wanting that look and having the desire to achieve that and not having that. And so that led me to getting breast implants. And it really was just a self-confidence, poor self-image issue that I think stemmed from childhood. And for me, didn't have a very healthy diet or lifestyle, but I didn't have any symptoms to speak of prior to having my breast implants placed. And so within about 6 months, I started having all kinds of symptoms and really unexplainable. I had fatigue, I had some weight gain that I was having a lot of trouble getting rid of. I was developing food intolerances. I had gas and bloating and just abdominal pain. I had acne. I had period problems. I had insomnia. I had heart palpitations and night sweats. And sometimes my heart would just race really fast out of nowhere, even when I wasn't doing anything. And I had irritability, anxiety, social anxiety, sensitivity to chemical smells, bright lights, loud sounds, things like that. So my nervous system was just really overstimulated and just shot. Any amount of stress that I was experiencing, whether it be physical from a workout or emotional from like a heated conversation, my body would just shut down. I couldn't tolerate any of it. So, this kind of happened over a long period of time, starting with a few symptoms and then slowly just developing into more and more and more. And I just became a very sick person, really unrecognizable. I didn't recognize myself. My family didn't recognize me. I was a very challenging person to be around because I felt so terrible. And when you feel really terrible, that tends to come out in how you treat other people, right? So my relationship suffered, my marriage, it was a new marriage. We had just gotten married a couple of years prior. So it was definitely challenging to kind of work through that so early on in my relationship with my husband. And it affected my ability to function the way that I wanted to at my job. Right. So it was not just me, it was affecting every aspect of my life. I wasn't enjoying life anymore. I wasn't happy, and it was just miserable. It felt absolutely miserable living in my body. So that kind of took me down this path of trying to figure out what was wrong. And I went from doctor to doctor. No one seemed to be able to figure it out. No one offered me any solutions, any help outside of therapy, medications, things like that, surgeries. And I wasn't really willing to go down that road. I knew there had to be an answer. And, I was working at a hospital at the time as a nurse, working night shift. I just thought maybe if I get off night shift, I'll feel better. I got off night shift. I didn't get better. So I kept digging, and I ended up discovering through working with a naturopathic doctor that I had Hashimoto's and SIBO and hormone imbalances, neurotransmitter imbalances, all sorts of things. But what was offered to me to support me wasn't that root cause approach that I was looking for. It was just more, supplementing every symptom with, a natural supplement, or masking every symptom with a natural supplement rather than a medication, which isn't really, going to help long-term. So that was what led me down the path of just becoming a holistic health practitioner myself, because I couldn't find the answers anywhere else. So that's what I did. I decided I'm going to go through this training program and work on myself. And if I can heal myself, then maybe I can help other people. I couldn't possibly be the only one going through this.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm curious, how did you connect the dots? So was it just, a short amount of time after you got the surgery that all of these issues started occurring?
Yeah, it was within about 6 months from my surgery that I started having some symptoms pop up, and then it just was a progressive thing. I didn't connect the dots right away. I mean, I did have this intuition, kind of this gut instinct about it. I remember kind of typing in Google symptoms developing after breast augmentation. And nobody was talking about this at the time. There were no websites, there were no blogs, there were no Facebook groups, there were no Instagram accounts, where now you see all of this everywhere. Everywhere you look, you just start Googling breast implant illness, you're going to find all kinds of things. But at the time, that no one was talking about it. And so I couldn't just rely and trust that gut instinct. That wasn't enough for me, because I just spent, $7,000, $7,500 getting them placed. And to go on a whim like that and just go and get them out, just, crossing my fingers that was the answer. I couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So it took me a long time of going down this path and trying all the things, dietary changes, lifestyle changes, treating the SIBO, treating the hormone imbalances, treating the neurotransmitter imbalances, trying to kill, Borrelia and co-infections and things like that. And getting candida under control and doing all this work that, yes, it's important, but if you still have the root cause in place, it's not going to be very effective long-term. Right. So
yep.
I remember asking a particular doctor that I was working with when I was kind of anecdotally diagnosed with Lyme, do you think my breast implants could be a factor here? And the answer was no, I don't think so. I think that if we just address the Lyme, everything else will balance itself out and the implants won't be a problem. And so I kept that hope that it wasn't the problem and kept going. And then I remember going through my training in FDN, mentioning that I had breast implants to my mentor. And he said to me, I don't know anything about this topic, but I think as a foreign object, I would think that your body would have a problem with that. And that if it were me, I would get them out immediately. And so I took that to heart. Like that was really reinforcing what I had thought, but I still wasn't ready.
Yeah.
I emotionally and mentally wasn't ready because I hadn't done that mental emotional work that drove my desire in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So fast forward many years later, unfortunately, and it really was the struggle to conceive and have a child that ended up pushing me in the direction to finally making the decision to explant. And so at that point, it was no longer about me, right? It was about my husband and I, the family that we wanted to create together, and thinking about, well, if these implants are causing all of these problems for me, if I'm right about this, then even if I did get pregnant, how would I be able to, could I even forgive myself if my child had all kinds of issues because of this, from, just in utero exposure to all of the toxins that are in breast implants, and then, breastfeeding, things like that. I didn't want to pass that along, to a future child. And so that was the ultimate deciding factor for me. I just knew I had to get them out. And once I finally came to terms with that, it was a long process, but once I finally came to terms with it, it was about 2 months later, I had them out. So I didn't waste any time once I had mentally gotten there. It just took me time to get there. And I knew I had developed stage 4 endometriosis because I had finally, had the right diagnostic imaging to discover that. And I knew I needed that surgery too, but I thought, well, I have to do the breast, I have to explant first. Like that's step 1, get the source out. And then do this other surgery to hopefully recover some function and some fertility.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, okay. So first of all, how do we define breast implant illness?
Yeah. So it's a tricky thing to define, right? So breast implant illness is just really a term that we give to, just a generalized term that we give to a process by which lots of vague and chronic symptoms develop following breast augmentation with either silicone or saline. The type of material doesn't matter. It can happen either way. It can happen at any point within days of augmentation or decades later. And it's characterized by a lot of symptoms that are vague enough to make it difficult to figure out. So the symptoms really cross a lot of different lines for diagnosing different conditions, right? So things like chronic fatigue, cognitive dysfunction, brain fog, difficulty concentrating, poor word retrieval, memory loss, things like muscle aches and pains, joint pain, hair loss, weight gain, weight loss, temperature intolerance, low libido, ringing in the ears, heart palpitations, shortness of breath, metallic taste in the mouth, night sweats, skin rashes, insomnia, hormone dysregulation, swollen and tender lymph nodes, numbness and tingling in the extremities, cold hands and feet, foul body odor, muscle twitching, vertigo, frequent urination, chemical sensitivity to light and sound, visual disturbances, liver and kidney dysfunction, GI issues like gas, bloating, diarrhea, constipation, GERD, heartburn, food intolerances, persistent infections that you can't get rid of, whether they're viral, bacterial, fungal, parasitic, constant throat clearing, coughing, difficulty swallowing, choking, chronic inflammation, feeling like you're dying, headaches, dizziness, migraines, mood swings, irritability, anxiety, depression, panic attacks, suicidal thoughts, even. So this is a huge list of symptoms, and I had almost all of them.
Wow.
And so when you have that many symptoms, I mean, you can imagine you're just trying to find someone who can give you an answer to why you feel so terrible.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't connect the dots until they hear it from somebody who has discovered breast implant illness, or they just randomly come across it when they're Google searching their symptoms, and then it's like this light bulb moment of, oh my God, I can't believe that I never thought of this, or I can't believe no one told me this, or I can't believe my doctor didn't think about this, So it's not, I wouldn't say it's like this at this point anyway, a diagnosable condition, but it's just like a term that we give it for all of these symptoms that develop at least partially as a result of having breast implants.
So is it inevitable if you get them, or does it only affect certain people who are just sensitive to the implants?
I think there's a lot of variables. So first of all, anytime you put a foreign material into your body, there is a potential, for problems to arise, for the immune system to kind of go haywire. And, breast implants are no exception to that. And so issues can develop, like I said, from both silicone or saline, either due to the chemicals, the heavy metals, the silicone. I mean, the saline implants also still have a silicone shell. So you're not, not exposed to silicone just because you have saline implants. And there's all kinds of other material or chemicals that are in them from manufacturing. And then there's the potential for bacteria and fungus to grow between the implant and the capsule, which is the scar tissue that develops around the implant after they're placed. And there's a potential for microbes to grow inside of saline implants as well. So there's like this toxicity component, there's this foreign body component, and there's an immune component, right? Pathogen component. And so that creates a lot of inflammation and dysregulation. And I wouldn't say dysregulation, I'd say adaptation in the body, just trying to adapt to things, right? And that leads to a lot of symptoms. And so I think it's a matter of time in most cases. I see people who never had a problem with their implants and they've had them for 2 decades, even though they're supposed to get them replaced every, 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And then bam, all of a sudden they're sick. And it's not necessarily that the implants themselves are the only issue here. I think it's more complicated than that. I think of BII, or breast implant illness. And I say that in quotes because I don't even love the term, because it gives the breast implants all of the credit, when I think they're just a part of the picture in most cases. So I think about like the perfect storm situation, right? Where in this case where someone's had them a long time with no issue, and then bam, all of a sudden they have an issue. I think, okay, so, maybe this person had been breastfed as a child, was born vaginally, good start in life, right? No antibiotics, didn't have, gut issues or immune system issues growing up, had a great diet, had a good upbringing, was supported emotionally, things like that. And then, maybe at some point in life, they got breast implants and they did fine. And fast forward, maybe several years later, they have a root canal. And so that tooth gets, work done. And maybe there's still an infection there, or an infection that develops, which is called the cavitation. Maybe they have some amalgam fillings in the mouth, which are, mercury. Mm-hmm. And then maybe down the road, there's a divorce or loss of a loved one, or maybe even some kind of physical trauma like a car accident. At some point, some kind of stressor is going to be the trigger, the tipping point, right? And the body sees all types of stress the same way and responds the same way. So for one person, the trigger may be the breast implants. For another person, it may be something else. But in my mind, it doesn't matter what came first, because we want to start removing all forms of stress on the body when there's so much adaptation that we have a lot of symptoms, right? So that's kind of how I think about it.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So I want to kind of go a little bit deeper into that. So how do breast implants impact specifically our hormonal health potentially?
What I tend to see, like I do a lot of Dutch testing, and what I tend to see is really tanked hormones or pretty significant estrogen dominance. And so when our body is facing a threat of some kind, whether it be physical, chemical, structural, and it's chronic, over time, your body starts adapting for survival. And so the more it has to deal with these chronic threats, the more it's going to start compensating and putting fertility on the back burner. And so when your body is trying to survive, it's not concerned with reproduction. And so hormones will take a back burner, and sometimes, or hormones will take a back seat, excuse me. And then sometimes actually what I see, like I said, is the estrogen dominance. And I think that what plays into that is the toxicity component. So depending on how toxic the body is, a lot of the time we have these, metalloestrogens or estrogen mimicking chemicals that we're exposed to that tend to create the situation where we have far more estrogen in the body than we do progesterone. And so that can create its own problems with reproduction as well. But that is what I typically see. And when we get the implants out, especially for me, when I had my hormones tested with implants, my hormones were all tanked across the board. I had very low production, even though I had endometriosis, which is an estrogen dominant condition. And it's tricky because oftentimes you won't even see estrogen dominance with people who have endometriosis. You won't see it on lab work, but at the level of the tissue, it can be like 10 times higher. And so what I typically see after explant and after we've done a lot of the work that needs to happen, restoring balance and detoxing the body, is that those things just balance themselves out without doing anything. Okay. Specifically for the hormones. So it's really kind of amazing how the body is so miraculous. I always tell people, you are a miracle, and your body knows what to do when you remove enough of the stress. It knows what to do to get back into balance. That's what it's constantly striving for. Right. So there's, just because the hormones are really dysregulated or tanked doesn't mean that they can't get back to normal.
Okay. What about how might they impact gut health? How might that show up?
The breast implants? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we know, we've seen studies done on this, that especially the silicone gel implants will bleed their contents out into the body at body temperature. So it's kind of, think of it like plastic. When you heat up plastic, like we know not to do that, right? Because it's just kind of bleeding the plastic into whatever you're consuming or whatever you're doing with it. And so we end up ingesting those plastics. It's similar with breast implants. You heat those up to body temperature, it's going to start bleeding. And what is around the breast is so much dense lymphatic tissue. And it's like the highway system for the body to bring nutrients into the cells and take toxins away for elimination through the urine and the stool, and also acts as part of the immune system. So when we have something that is full of silicone, which is a neurotoxin, and it's also incredibly sticky, and it is bound to platinum. And as a side note, I developed a platinum allergy when I had my breast implants in. I could not wear my wedding ring. It created this ring of fire around my finger. But going back to the gut, so we have the silicone, the platinum, we've got these other toxins and heavy metals, things that are considered carcinogenic and neurotoxic, that are bleeding out and traveling through the lymph and ending up in the gut. And I think that also feeds the microorganisms that are there. So the dysbiosis, things like candida or bacterial overgrowth or parasites that we might see in the gut as a problem that might create a lot of symptoms, aren't the root cause. The root cause is the toxicity that's feeding that overgrowth. And so doing something like just, taking rifaximin like I did when I had SIBO, or going on a quote unquote candida cleanse, or doing a parasite protocol, things like that are not going to be effective for very long, because as soon as you stop doing that, the issue is going to return because it's still being fed downstream. Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. So I think it's the toxicity that's feeding the pathogenicity in the gut and creating all kinds of gut issues, leaky gut, which then leads to food sensitivities and autoimmunity. It's a chemical onslaught to your gut.
Okay. So if somebody is just now discovering breast implant illness and they think it might be a problem for them, what should they do? What are some of the first steps that they should take?
So thinking back to when I first had the thought and was really kind of worried about that, I think, if you're finding this out for the first time and you think it could be a part of your picture, I think the first thing to do is get into a group, a Facebook group or two, because I think it's helpful to hear and read other people's stories and to be able to see yourself in those stories, because it's a real eye opener. And it really helps you also realize that you're not alone, that this is happening to hundreds of thousands of women. And that when you explant and take the right steps to restore normal function in the body, that you can get back to feeling like your optimal self again. So it gives a lot of, first of all, clarity, and then secondly, hope.
Okay.
Right. So I think that's important. And then I think it's also important to dive deeper and kind of sort through what drove you to get the implants in the first place, because that needs to be worked out. Like that mental, emotional work needs to happen. Otherwise, what you're going to end up seeing is having the implants out and being a total wreck emotionally, because you haven't dealt with that yet. So I think that's important to come to terms with prior to your explant, so that you going into it feel really comfortable and confident and like, yes, this is the right decision and I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
And then I think it's helpful to start looking at surgeons, start interviewing surgeons if you feel like this is the right decision for you to explant. And I have a list of like the top explant surgeons on my website, which is reversingbreastimplantillness.com. And then there are other websites that also have lists of surgeons by country and state. Mm-hmm. I have a very tiny list because I personally only want the absolute best of the best operating on me. And so those are the only people I list there. And then, but if you want a bigger list, a website that would be really great is breastimplantillness.com. Much larger list there. And, I don't have enough time to really keep up with all the new surgeons who are coming out and doing explants either.
Right.
So interviewing them, they need to be very skilled and experienced with explant surgery. There's a proper way to do an explant surgery and a wrong way to do it that will not help you in the long run. And you'll end up spending more money and having to go back for another surgery. So I think that's really important.
So will you talk to us about like what that proper procedure looks like, so people can know when they're interviewing surgeons, what types of questions they should be asking, and in terms of their expectations, how they can really frame that up appropriately?
Yeah, I think that, so it's really important to look for a surgeon who, like I said, has lots of experience, has done hundreds of explants, believes you, and believes in what you're saying, believes in BII, ideally doesn't put them in anymore in my perfect world. And then for proper explant procedure, you want to make sure that they will do the absolute best that they can to remove them en bloc. That's not always going to be possible, but it is in most cases.
What does that mean? We explain that?
Yeah, that means that they're removing the implants with the capsule around the implant as one unit. Okay. So they're not cutting the capsule open and taking the implant out and then taking the capsule out. That would be second best scenario. But the reason you want to try to avoid that is because you don't know if there's a rupture until you get in there. And with saline, it's a little more obvious, but with silicone, it is not. And MRI, other imaging is not, it's just not very efficacious. So sometimes they'll be missed. Rupture will be missed, oftentimes actually. And sometimes you'll get like a false, positive rupture on imaging and it's not actually ruptured. But either way, I think it's just best to assume they're ruptured and do an en bloc removal. And then every speck of that capsule should be removed. And so sometimes, even with on block, there's still little pieces left behind that are stuck to the ribs or stuck to the muscle or the fatty tissue, and you want those taken out because, like I said, the capsule can be contaminated with all kinds of different microorganisms and silicone and all these different toxins that are in the breast implants. And that continues to stimulate the immune system and expose you to more toxins, right? So we want to remove that thing that's ultimately still causing an immune response, right? So I have seen people, I've even had clients who, unfortunately, their surgeon didn't remove the capsule. And we did what we could. We did the best that we could, but it ended up being that ultimately they needed to go back for a second surgery to get the rest of that capsule out.
So when they fully remove the capsule, what's the proper terminology that they should be using to explain that to the surgeon that that's in fact what they want?
Yeah, a complete capsulectomy.
Capsulectomy. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And then what do people need to do to get prepared for surgery if they decide that this is the right path for them to go down?
So I think there's some really basic things that people can do. And sometimes a lot of people who've been struggling for a long time are already doing these things because they're trying to like just get better. But, cleaning up the diet, I think like cleaning up as much as we can going into it is ideal. And usually people are waiting, just sitting around kind of waiting for their explant surgery for months at a time. And you can do a lot of this work before your explant. So cleaning up the diet, focusing on whole, real foods that have walked the earth or grown in the ground. Eating organic as much as possible. Eating organic does not mean you're not getting exposed to toxins, but it means you're getting less exposure. Okay. Focusing on pasture-raised organic animal meat, animal protein, especially red meat. I think that's really important. The liver needs a lot of the nutrients that are in red meat to function properly. Pasture-raised organic eggs, if you can tolerate that. Not everyone tolerates eggs, but I think that is like red meat and eggs are two of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. Mm-hmm. And so all that good phosphatidylcholine, those, fat-soluble vitamins and the protein and everything is really helpful for prepping the liver and you're helping to build healthy cells, and then also really important for healing post-explant. And then, leafy greens, some low sugar fruits, cruciferous veggies, if you tolerate those, also really good for, phase 2 detoxification in the liver, because they're giving you those supportive nutrients that you need to make glutathione and to sulfate and all that sort of thing. And then good, clean water is really important because I want to think about like the sources of contamination beyond the breast implants that are still exposing you to toxins, and water and food are huge. I think water is more important than food, to be honest, because you just look up your water on ewg.org, type your zip code into the database, and you'll see what's in your water. It is
will you say the resource again?
Yeah. EWG, Environmental Working Group.
Okay.
ewg.org.
Okay.
So I always do that with my clients when I'm talking with them. Is like, let's see what's in your water. Yeah. Because there's always, if you're having trouble getting certain gut issues under control, then you're still exposed to something. And we got to figure out where it's coming from. Right. So, filtered water, bottled water is not sufficient. A Brita filter is not sufficient. Your fridge filter is not sufficient. And I would venture to say even the Big Berkey, which I used to recommend all the time, is not sufficient. So now what I'm recommending is distillation.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Let's see. And so water, good air filtration in your home, because things off gas. Even if you don't have a new home, your things are off gassing. The building materials off gas for 5, 10, even 15 years sometimes. New furniture, new carpeting, electronics, like everything off gases these days. And so filtering that air in your home is going to help reduce what you're exposed to in the home. And homes are built so airtight these days, right? The most toxic air is the indoor air.
Yeah.
And then, making sure you're working on supporting your drainage pathways. So what I mean by that is your pathways of elimination. So bowel movements. So it's really important, especially when you're detoxing, that you're moving the bowels 2 to 3 times a day. And if you're someone who struggles with constipation, you've got to get the bowels moving. And that's also going to be really helpful post-operatively, because when you have all that anesthesia and pain medications on board, you're going to be incredibly constipated. So, I don't like to recommend supplements willy-nilly on podcasts and things like that. But I will say something that you can just get at the store that might be beneficial if you're really struggling and just need to like get things moving would be something like Smooth Move tea. Mm-hmm. That's great. Mag oxide is helpful for some people. And I think those things are good to have on hand for your post-op period as well. And then, if you're eating a well-rounded, nutrient-dense diet, you're going to be eating foods that nourish and support the liver and kidneys and gallbladder, but those are also drainage pathways that we want to focus on supporting. A good probiotic is helpful because you're going to get antibiotics in surgery. If you tolerate a probiotic, not everyone does. What else? The lymph, I probably wouldn't do lymphatic massages or things to get them lymph moving until afterward. And honestly, I'm really cautious about that with people because you just don't know how much is hiding out in the lymph. And when you get that moving, it can be very painful. Yeah. When you start like detoxing that stuff, and if you're moving pathogens too, then your immune system is going crazy. Yeah. So that you have to be careful about. And then just working on your mindset, your mental, emotional health, working on supporting the parasympathetic nervous system, deep breathing, breath work, meditation, slow, gentle movements with your body, like stretching or gentle yoga, just to keep your body more in a calm, relaxed state. Right. So good sleep is key. We need to be supporting sleep. If we're not sleeping, we're not detoxing and we're not healing. So you need to be getting good deep sleep and REM sleep. And so a lot of people find things like melatonin helpful. There are lots of things you can do to support sleep, but some of the really basic things that don't involve a supplement are getting your eyeballs in the sunlight every morning, getting your eyeballs in the sunlight at sunset as well. So sunrise and sunset, the blue light from the sunrise stimulates your cortisol production and shuts down your melatonin production. And then the red light from the sunset does the opposite. It stimulates melatonin and shuts down cortisol. And that's how you get your circadian rhythm. And we're bombarded with all this blue light all day long, and people's sleep suffers because of that. So blue light blocking glasses are helpful. Keeping your lights dim at night. Don't do anything too excitatory at night. Keep it calm and relaxing, and do what you can to support the best sleep possible. Getting Wi-Fi out of the house, or at least turning it off at night, that can be helpful as well.
I think all of these suggestions are fantastic for everybody, regardless of whether you're going to go through the surgery or not. I'm just like, yep, I agree with you 100%. Okay. So can we talk about the mental and emotional challenges that people might be going through? Because, you said you weren't quite ready to do the surgery until you got clear that, there was a different priority for you in life. So what are some of the things, and I don't know if this is an area that you support with the work that you do or not, but, how do you recommend that people who are going to go through this kind of address, self-esteem issues that are going to come, potentially after, going through the surgery?
I think that, so here, I don't have all the answers for this because it's not my personal expertise, right? But if someone is really struggling, then I find someone, who is the right fit for addressing that side of things. If it's, if it's something I can help with, I always do. And I think it's just even helpful to have a conversation around it. But for me personally, it was just finally coming to an understanding and realizing who I am beyond my physical appearance. And so I put a lot of stock in my physical appearance in the past. And I way too much. And so I just got to this place where I was so unwell for me that it just didn't matter anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I just started getting really in touch with what makes me me and what makes me special and unique and worthy, beyond that appearance. And so I would start journaling. I did some journaling about, those types of things. And I think it's also important to be aware of your feelings and your emotions and your thoughts. And, you can't heal without feeling. And so I think it's important to think about, what is it that you're feeling? Are you judging yourself? Are you judging your emotions? And are these things happening to you, or are they happening for you? Because I think that is a really big distinguishing factor that's really powerful. If you can grasp that, is everything that you've been through, everything that has happened in your life, you're not a victim. Like, this isn't happening to you for any reason. You're not at fault. And it's happening for you. Think about where you would be if you hadn't gone through all of this. And for me, I know I would have been eating the standard American diet. I would have been drinking a lot more alcohol. I would have been up really late and sleeping in really late. I would have been treating my body poorly and probably being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, because that's a family history. And, maybe end up with who knows what kinds of diseases, right? Because that's a lifestyle that leads to disease. So this was a wake-up call for me. And this path allowed me to learn how I should be living. And I think that also is really important, because when we learn it, we can also teach that to our children, and that changes the next generation, right? So this goes beyond even ourselves. So I think that is something really great that we can take away from this experience. And yeah. And then, like I said, focus on awareness, focus on, what you're feeling. So language is important. So if you're fearful, instead of saying, I'm afraid, you're claiming that, like, I am this, right? Mm-hmm. Instead of I am this, I am feeling fear, right? So that you're just acknowledging a feeling rather than saying that you are something, right? So language is so powerful. And then just getting away from talking about what you should be doing or where you should be in your healing journey. Stop shoulding all over yourself, right? And this just fuels the fear and the doubt at any point in the journey. And then if you're feeling like you have a setback, wherever you are at this point, thinking about it, just working on a mindset shift and thinking, instead of thinking about it as a setback, thinking about it as a setup. So you are being set up for even better, and greater things, for more healing, for whatever it is. You're being set up, not set back. So I think that the mindset work is so important. And just working on shifting the way you're talking about yourself and the way you're talking to yourself, even in your thoughts, because thoughts are things and they become our reality if we feed them.
I so appreciate your insightfulness and your wisdom, Sarah. Thank you for sharing all of that.
Yeah. Of course.
So after the surgery, should people go through a detox?
So I get this question a lot. And I think because of the Facebook groups out there, there's a lot of re-educating I have to do. But because of the Facebook groups out there, people come to me just thinking that's what they want from me and that's what they need. And really, I think, yes, you do need to detox. I mean, that's an absolute must. It's not a question of, do you, but you have to. Mm-hmm. And regardless, breast implant illness or not, regardless of what you're dealing with, detox is always a part of that picture. But is it the starting place? Right? So no, it's not the starting place. And like I said, when I talked about what you can do pre-explant, that also applies to post-explant. So I always recommend starting with the drainage, because think about if you're trying to detox and pull things out of the tissues and the cells, but the drainage pathways aren't working well, how are those things going to get out? right? They're just not, they're going to recirculate and you're going to auto intoxicate yourself. So that can feel a lot worse. So I always start with drainage, making sure we're supporting those drainage pathways. If someone needs, support reestablishing methylation and glutathione production and getting enough good fatty acids in their diet, supporting the mitochondria, those are the places I focus first, starting to reseed the microbiome a little bit. And I think that's really, the mitochondria are key because the mitochondria control every single cell and function in your body. And if your mitochondria are down or they're in battleship mode, they're not going to be in energy production mode, right? And so you're not going to be able to detox because detox is energy expensive. So we have to, it's like, and even dealing with like pathogens, right? So think about it like this. You can have, mitochondrial down here, mitochondrial function down here. You can have pathogen load really high up here. And let's say you're someone who thinks, I need to go on a candida cleanse. You bring the candida down, but you don't work on mitochondria. They're just going to come right back up again. You've got to bring the mitochondria up to keep that down, right? So that's really important that most people miss. And then once you have all of that working really well, then you can start going into deeper gut work. And I think that is really important to do before detox work because we want to reduce the pathogenic load. And I really focus a lot on parasites because they hold their weight in toxins. And so we want to start, like I said, removing sources of exposure before we get deeper pulling things out of the body. Right. Okay. So that is actually going to make your detox experience a lot easier and a lot less painful. And it's not about like getting rid of all parasites. And then people might think, well, how do I know if I have a parasite? And let me just tell you, if you have a pulse, you have a parasite. I guarantee you. And it often will not show up on blood work often will not show up on stool analysis because I can tell you, I've probably seen a parasite on a stool test maybe twice. And it's because they're PCR tests. And so they're just really ineffective. They don't do a great job at detecting things. And by the time the sample gets to the lab, a lot of the parasites are already kind of broken down. Mm-hmm. And you may not even see a parasite in every bowel movement. So it really just is like, it's a crapshoot, like whether one just happens to be there that day. Yeah, literally. So I don't often do stool analysis looking for the parasite, but when we do the work, people see parasites coming out 100% of the time. Wow. So we know they're there. And that really influences your immune system and how it's functioning. So we have to go there. And you would be surprised how much better people feel just doing that part of the work. And then we can get deeper and do the detox work. And I think, the right type of binder is really important. A lot of people think, clays and activated charcoal and things like that are sufficient binders, and they're not. Those are binders that are spent. They don't have any energy associated with them, and they stay in the gut. They're not going to go systemic. So we have to use binders that go systemic. And really, this is going to mean you're going to need to work with a practitioner. It doesn't have to be me, but work with somebody who knows detox because it can make or break, the experience, someone who really understands it. Okay. So that's a really important step, and supporting the drainage pathways along the way is really important. And then, then you can go into, the bigger fish like pathogens that cause Lyme and co-infections. So those I tend to leave the big fish for last. So once we kind of get the gut pathogen load down and the toxicity load down, then you're going to have a lot easier time dealing with things like Borrelia and Bartonella and Babesia and Rickettsia and all of those different stealthy kind of organisms that a lot of us do have. And it's not just coming from a tick bite. They can be transmitted through a mosquito, any biting insect really, through sexual transmission, in utero. There's just so many ways people can get these bugs that I guarantee you we all have them. It's just a matter of, can your immune system keep it at bay? And if not, why is that? Right. So that's kind of like my process. Yeah. It doesn't look the same from person to person, but that's the general framework.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. All right. So what should somebody expect, after the surgery?
You're okay. So, well, the mental emotional stuff can fluctuate, can be different for different people. For me, I was just like, hey, I'm happy to have these things out of me. I don't even care what I look like. For some people, that can be hard. And then swelling, swelling is going to be something that you notice, and that will get better with time. There may be some discomfort as well. It's a very aggressive surgery. And sometimes it involves really like scraping the ribs to get all the capsule off. And so you may be very tender and sore. I know for me, I had a hard time breathing, like taking a deep breath, because my ribs were so sore because he had to scrape all the capsule off. Let's see here, depending on whether you have, liposuction and a fat transfer at the same time, your experience may be a little different. I wish I hadn't, but I did. And for me, I couldn't even pull my pants up or down. Like I had to have help. Mm-hmm. You really can't shower yourself, like some of those basic daily things, activities you're going to need help with. You're just going to want to rest as much as possible and listen to your body, feed it a nutrient dense diet, listen to your cravings, as long as they're not a candy bar or ice cream. If you're craving something, it's probably because your body needs that to heal from that surgery. So, or there's something in that food, right? So I always I don't believe in one specific diet. I always try to encourage people to listen to their bodies. And so you may go through periods where you start to question things if your symptoms aren't all the way better, right? So that's another thing that's a huge misconception. A lot of the times people will see these stories on Instagram or Facebook where somebody explanted and they have this pre and post explant picture of just their face, and their face looks so different after explant. And I question those photos. Not to say that I don't believe people, but I also think that there's this honeymoon period a lot of the time where people just initially feel better because they have the source removed. But understand that a lot of the time those people do experience some symptoms kind of returning, and it's because there's more work to do. Yes, you're initially going to feel quite a bit better, but that doesn't mean you're completely healed. You don't heal just like that. Yeah. So we need to do the work in order to heal. What else can I tell you? Breast tissue, what you look like right after surgery is not going to be what you look like a year from now, or even a week from now. There's constant remodeling happening every single moment of every single day, and they're going to change every week. They're going to look different. So just, keep that in mind. Don't be too devastated when you see yourself for the first time, because they're going to look so much better as time goes on.
Okay. So what else, besides detox, should people focus on during this healing process?
Well, so I don't like in the initial period of healing, I think give it 4 to 5, maybe even 6 weeks before doing anything. Okay. Where you just rest, you listen to your body, you don't do much activity, you don't do the sauna or anything like that. You just kind of rest. A little bit of walking is probably okay, but nothing beyond that. And just, listening to what your body needs. And, I would say, as long as you haven't developed an infection or a hematoma or wound dehiscence where like your incisions are kind of separating, right? If you don't have any complications, then you can go ahead and start doing some of this work about 4, 5, 6 weeks post-op. Prior to that, you're not doing anything but hydrating and getting lots of good nutrients in and resting.
Okay. So we've covered a lot of ground today. Just to recap, like, once somebody's gone through the explant surgery, what do you think are like the top 3 recommendations that you have for people in order to start feeling better faster?
These things are so simple, but and sometimes people think it's too simple to be helpful, but it truly is. Getting sunlight. Just get outside, get sun exposure every single day without sunscreen on. You don't stay out so long that you burn, but stay out long enough to get that glow on your skin. And getting that sunlight is so important for health, for reducing inflammation, for vitamin D production, of course, for your overall mental, emotional well-being. It's good to get outside and get that sunlight. And then prioritizing sleep is the second one. So I talked a lot about that, but you cannot underestimate the power of good sleep. And so one tool that I think is really helpful that I recommend to all my clients is getting an Aura ring, which I have here as well. And the Aura ring just helps you see what your sleep is like. And that's how important I think sleep is. Everyone should have one of these. And so you can see how much deep sleep, REM sleep, light sleep, how restful your sleep was, how many times you woke up, how long it took you to fall asleep, what your heart rate was like, what your heart rate variability was like, what your temperature was, all of these different things overnight. And you can see what things impact your sleep as well. So if you had a meal too late, or if you had sugar, or you had alcohol, you're going to see how that's impacting your sleep that night, which I think is really valuable information, because then you can do something about it to improve your sleep, to optimize your sleep. And truly, that's the best thing you can do for yourself is optimizing sleep. So sleep, sunlight, and gosh, if you do nothing else, I would say get a water distiller. Distill your water and don't worry about the minerals in the water, because the minerals in the water are inorganic minerals, and your body doesn't know what to do with those anyway. They're considered toxic to your body. So you're going to get most of your minerals from food if you have a good solid diet and you're not eating the standard American diet full of crap, right? So that's a huge misconception about distilled water. You want the cleanest water possible and just hydrate. You need that hydration.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Okay. So let's shift gears and talk about where people can find you.
So my website is one place, which is reversingbreastimplantillness.com. And if you want to connect with me there, there's a link there. You can apply for a discovery call with me, which is complimentary. If you're interested in just finding out more about working together, that would be the way to do that. If you're just looking for general information and guidance, then Facebook groups are a great place to do that. I have a Facebook group as well. Same name, Reversing Breast Implant Illness. I also, post on Instagram, and I'm starting to get more regular about that. So same handle, Reversing Breast Implant Illness. And I'm on Pinterest. I'm everywhere.
With all the challenges that everybody in the health and wellness field is dealing with these days, and by the way, today is November 5th, 2021. Do you have any plans to switch platforms at any time, just so you can feel comfortable speaking freely about the topic that you cover?
Well, I definitely have been thinking for a long time now, I want to get off of Facebook altogether. And the only thing keeping me on Facebook is, a couple of practitioner groups that I'm in, which it's hard to get away from that because I want to be in the group. But I know those groups are also working on getting off of Facebook too. So I think as soon as they leave Facebook, I'm gone.
Okay. All right. So should people just follow, touch base with you on your website? If they listen to this, months down the road and you've transitioned to a new platform?
Yeah. My website is good. It'll always be there. And you can subscribe to my newsletter and then you'll hear from me that way as well.
Okay, perfect. So they go to your website, they sign up for your newsletter, and they can always stay in touch and you'll inform them from there. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Are you running any, special programs or things right now that people, or a quiz or something like that people could take in order to find out, maybe to do an initial assessment about some of the issues that they might be struggling with?
Yeah. So when you sign up for my newsletter, you also get a neurotoxic questionnaire, which is kind of like a symptom checklist. It categorizes your symptoms into different categories, looking at your overall toxicity score based on how you're rating your symptoms. And then as a follow-up to that, I send out another email just explaining how to interpret your scoring, and how I look at it, what I look for, and what the scores mean. So that's what you get with that. And then I do, my signature program is their Explant Reset program. It's not something that someone can just go and buy, though. It's really just working with me one-on-one. Soon there will be a group program that I'm going to be launching where, it's going to be the same work that I do with my one-on-one clients, except we're going to be doing it as a group, which makes, the investment a bit more affordable for more people. And then very soon, this is by the time you air this, I probably will have launched it. So I'll tell you now. I'm partnering up with a company that does some DNA testing, and they've actually been studying genes that are connected to the expression of symptoms connected with breast implant illness. And so they haven't had anything to do with this information for as long as they've been collecting it and studying it. And so we have partnered. We're finally going to do something with this information. And so this test will be available, and it'll be available on my website very soon here, if not already by the time this airs. So that'll be helpful for looking at your entire genome sequence, right? Not just what 23andMe shows you,
right?
But everything, and how all of those things combine, not just isolated gene mutations, but how all of those genes that you have combined impact function. And so there's different categories in that report: how to optimize sleep, immune function, detoxification, diet, exercise, hormone balance, cardiovascular health for your genes. And there's a BII report specifically showing you which genes may be contributing to your expression of breast implant illness, which is really fascinating.
Indeed. Okay. So if somebody wants to work with you, what could they expect as an outcome from working with you one-on-one, or in the future joining your group program?
As an outcome. So outcomes are really specific to the individual, but my goal is to always get in touch with like your deep why, for why you've explanted, why you're wanting to do this work. Why are you on this journey? And I think that's really important. So for me, my why, as I told you, was so that I could optimize my fertility to give me the best chance at having a family. Right. And so that is such a deep why. And I have such a strong connection with it that it kept me motivated to keep going. Right. And I'm still working on that journey. And so, like I said, this is not a quick fix. There is no quick fix. It's just doing the work. And so whatever that goal is for someone, that's my goal for them. That's the goal in working with me, is that we achieve that, whatever it is. And so it looks different for every person, but ultimately it's so that it's to do all the things that I just described in my program, doing all that work so that you can get back to feeling like your optimal self again.
That's awesome. Thank you. And would you recommend that people reach out to you prior to doing the surgery or after the surgery, or does it matter?
Either or. I am also very close to launching a pre-explant prep program. So it's really designed for the people who want to optimize their function before they go into surgery. Okay. It's going to be 6 weeks long. And it's going to be guided by me, and it's really going to set you up for a better recovery. And so that's something that you can do. And then if you're wanting to work with me personally, though, one-on-one, I would say it's best to reach out when you have a date set. And then we can know, like, how much can we accomplish before your surgery, or do we need to wait until after your surgery?
Got it. Okay. Sarah, it has been such a pleasure speaking with you today and learning more about your expertise. Thank you so much for educating all of us about breast implant illness. And just really grateful for you, your time, your wisdom, your expertise, and all the insight that you brought to this conversation today. Thank you so much. We will post all of your contact information, all of your links, all of the different ways people can get in touch with you in our show notes. And, if this is a journey that you're interested in going on and you're looking for support, please reach out to Sarah Phillipe. Thanks so much, you guys. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you again next time.